or at the left-hand side, I'm gonna work on my tail fin for my fish. So starting here at the corner, I'm gonna draw a line that comes in, maybe going like toward the other opposite corner of my paper. But I'm going to stop when my line is about as long as my finger. Okay, something about like that. So they should be about the same distance here. Okay, excellent. Now on the other piece of paper, on the other end of my paper, I'm going to find the very center of this edge. And how you do that is we're going to take our two corners and we're going to make them meet. I'm going to fold them in half so that my two corners meet. There's my two corners, okay? And then I'm just going to pinch right there, okay? That's going to tell me where the center of my piece of paper is, okay? And I'm going to make a curved line that goes from here to there for my fish. If it works for you to keep your paper turned sideways, you can, but it's hard for me to see that because it's being blocked by my hand. So I'm actually going to turn my paper tall and skinny like this. And I'm just going to do a line that curves, and I want it to curve almost to the top of my paper here, leaving a little space. If you make yours go all the way, that's fine too. And then I'm gonna do this because it blocks my fold here if I have it turned the other way. So I rotate my paper a lot while I'm drawing. Okay. So I've got my line curved there. They meet here at the center. Let's see. I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like this curved line is very similar to this curved line. I feel like they kind of go together. So I'm gonna be happy with that. I like that. So I'm gonna stop there. Okay. After I've got my fish shape drawn, I'm gonna grab my scissors and I'm gonna cut him out. And I'm just cutting on my pencil lines. Okay, my fish is going to become the loom for my rainbow weaving. Okay, there's my fish. Throw away my scraps. There we go. Okay, now that I have my fish, I'm gonna fold them in half. I'm gonna take the nose of my fish and I'm gonna fold him down here to my fin, like so. Okay, so my fin and my nose match up, and I'm going to make 7 marks on my piece of paper. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna put one here in the center. So there's one in the center of my fish. So there's one. Now I'm going to put 3 on each side of that, and I'm going to try to put them about the same distance apart from each other. So there's 1, 2, 3. Notice that they're all about the same distance. So I don't want to put one really close to it. I'm going to try to keep them equal distance apart. It's okay if they're not exact, but I want them to be close. Okay, so let's see, do I have 7 marks? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have my 7 marks. Excellent. Okay, my next step is these lines. I'm going to cut on them, but I'm going to cut so that I don't accidentally cut too far. So here's the end of my fish here. I want to stop before I get to my tail. I don't want to cut too close. So here's what it's going to kind of look like. I'm going to cut on my line, and I'm going to cut until I get about there, because I want a distance between my cut and the edge of my fish's tail. I don't want to get too close. I'm going to cut, and when I cut them, I want them to all stop about the same place. Okay, there we go. So all of my cuts have cut about the same place. Actually, these could go a little bit farther. Okay, there we go. So when I unfold my fish, I now have all these lines here, okay? But I have a good distance between the cut I've made here and the front of my fish. So to help make this a little farther, while my fish is open, okay? While my fish is open, I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm gonna stick them in there, and I'm gonna continue to cut on my line until I get about where I did down here. So I left about a finger's width between the end of my cut and the side of my fish. I've tried to do about that same thing there. Okay, and then I'm gonna jump over here and do it on this side, and I'm gonna cut until I have about a finger's width in between my end of my cut and the side of my fish, okay? Then I'll go back and I'll make those cuts go to about the same place, okay? The reason why I'm not cutting all the way to the end of my fish is because when I complete my weaving, I want the strips that I weave to stay in place. I don't want them to come out of my fish, but I have to have enough space to fit all of my color strips inside my loom. So right now, my fish is still all together in one piece, and I've got all these strips going through the center, almost like his ribs, if you will, or his gills, okay? This is where we're going to put our rainbow strips that we've woven. All right, I have here 6 strips of colors. They are my rainbow order, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and I'm going to weave them in to my loom in that order. So I'm gonna start with red, and I'm gonna take my strip of paper, and this first strip here, I'm gonna stick it underneath and come out so it's on top of the next one. And then this one here, I'm gonna go underneath, and then I'll go on top, under, and then over, and then under. And that's my last one. And when I do that, I'm gonna pull it through so that I have equal distance here and here, about like that. And then I'm gonna take him and I'm gonna slide him all the way over to the edge of my cuts, like that, okay? Next comes orange, but this time I'm gonna do the opposite. So I started with my red going underneath this strip. I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm going to come up underneath this piece right here so that way I'm over. They're gonna alternate and create like a checkered pattern. So I'm going under and over and under, okay, until I've got him all the way in, and then I'm gonna slide him so that he's equal distance at the bottom and the top, and then I'll slide my strip over here so that it lines up with my red. And I'm gonna do that for the rest of my colors. Now that I've woven in all 6 colors to my fish, I'm going to use my crayons to add details to my fish. I'll put on an eye, a mouth, and if I'd like to add some scales, I can use a type of line called a half drop pattern. A half drop pattern is a wavy line that repeats, but every time it repeats, the line moves over just a little bit, like this. This is how you make scales. I'm going to fill in the white space around my 6 colors with scales. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add lines on my fin. You can use any color you like, but I decided to use some rainbow color crayons. Okay, I have colored my underwater scene for my rainbow fish here. I've added in some plants, I've added in some coral reef, I've got my sand at the bottom, and I even added in a cute little jellyfish swimming behind. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take my blue washable marker and I'm just gonna kind of draw in some kind of water lines here. You can make them just kind of squiggle lines. You can make them wiggly. Don't ignore all areas. I'm trying not to color on my plants just because the wax from the crayons can do some weird stuff to your markers if it gets a lot on them. Okay. Okay, there's my water lines. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a cup of water and I'm gonna take a paintbrush and I'm just gonna dip it into the water and we're going to just gently rub across our blue lines here. And I'm not rubbing vigorously, like back and forth a ton, but I'm just kind of going over my marker lines, trying to blend them and allow them to kind of run with the water. This is another great way that if you are wanting to paint with watercolors at home and maybe you don't have any watercolor paints, but you do have markers, you got markers, you can make watercolors. Most markers are going to be washable, which means they react with water. Okay. Now, like I said, my paper here is not watercolor paper, which means it's not really meant to get wet. It's okay if it gets a little wet, but if I sit there and paint with my wet paintbrush over and over and over again in the same spot, I'm gonna end up with a hole in my paper. I'm gonna break down the surface of my paper and it's gonna end up being very thin and it's going to create a hole. So I don't wanna do too much. You can kind of see some places where my paper is starting to be like, okay, that's enough. So there we go. I'm gonna stop on that. My water's kind of blending in. I'm gonna let that dry for a while and then I will add on my rainbow fish. Okay, now that our background has dried, we're gonna take our rainbow fish and turn it over. And we're gonna put some glue right here in the center over our rainbow strips. And we're gonna glue it on. We're gonna glue it on kind of at an angle and it's going to kind of hang off our paper just a little bit in places. Kind of give it this fun kind of artsy look to it. Okay. And if you've got some spaces like here, I didn't put glue on my tail, but my tail is stuck down. I'm gonna add just a little bit of glue to the back and stick that part down. And I'm gonna do the same thing up here with his nose. And there we go. There's our rainbow fish. And then the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna trim our strips here so that they look more like fins, okay? So I'm gonna start here and I'm just kind of cutting at an angle up the side so it looks like a fish fin. And this way we'll do this direction. And there we go. There is our rainbow fish.